this is our first singing social chat, and today I'll be chatting to Antonia Cviic, who is a singing teacher and a singer. Hello.
Hello, Jane. Lovely to see you.
Yes, and you too. So we're going to have a little chat today about all things singing, about your teaching and all the things that come along with it. So first of all, do you want to tell us a little bit about your singing experience and how you got into singing in the first place?
Okay, so I actually started off as a violin player. I started learning the violin when I was 5. And singing was always something I did kind of alongside the instrumental training. So violin, and then piano followed, learning the piano at 7. And, I sang actually from an early age in a choir, in a church choir. I remember being desperate, to go along and getting, begging my mum to take me to the first rehearsal, and all the sort of kids being much older and bigger, and sort of being quite intimidated by the whole experience, and not really being able to read the music properly, but still just loving the experience, at that very young age, and really getting getting a kind of like a buzz from it and wanting to continue doing all that. So yeah, singing was definitely something I did mainly as a choral activity, sort of when I was a child. And then when I was a little bit older, my mum gave me some singing lessons. So she's actually a singing teacher herself. And I actually, when I was a child though, I did go in for some music festivals. So I sort of competed, in those, some of those amateur kind of local music festivals where you sing a song. You know what I mean, right?
Oh, it's a breeding ground for singers, isn't it?
It was quite scary, actually. So it was very good to do, good experience, But there were some classes where you'd have to sing the same song, like everybody would have to sing the same song, and that was quite interesting. And then others where you could choose what you wanted to do. But then later on, I did it a bit more seriously with my mum, actually, when I was a teenager, and she actually put me in for a couple of singing exams. And that was sort of took me to the end of my, I suppose, school years, really. So I didn't.
So how did that manifest itself with a mum and a daughter scenario? Because that could go horribly wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that no. I mean, my mum's great. I love my mum. She had lots of really, really good ways, technical tips to give me, and things about breathing, and that was really, really useful. But I do think that, yeah, obviously the mother-daughter dynamic meant there were times when, well, I could be quite difficult as a pupil. And a bit stroppy and so on. So I think it was probably wise then that when I did when I went to university, I did get lessons with somebody else, not a member of the family. So
it's like trying to teach somebody to drive. I mean, it's just the worst situation, isn't it? I mean, thinking about in the future teaching my daughter to sing would just feel like the most difficult thing in the world, because there's no way she'd take it from me.
That's the thing, isn't it? I know. And I look back and I think, oh my gosh, I definitely wasn't the easiest of pupils for her, but there we go. I did learn some really good things from her. So she did really set me off. She really inspired me, actually, and she played opera to me, and operetta. So there was a lot of influence coming from her in terms of the sort of like vocal music that I listened to, and
So was she a singer herself?
Yeah, so she was actually also a singer as well as a singing teacher. Yeah, so she'd sung in operas and operetta and concerts and stuff like that. So yeah, I was definitely influenced a lot by her.
When you went to university, did you study music?
I studied music and drama as a joint degree. And while I was there, I had singing lessons. Actually, not at the university itself. I had private lessons that I would take, but as every 2 weeks or so, I'd have lessons with a teacher in London. Yeah. So that was the kind of beginning of singing as a kind of more formal, more formal training, I suppose you'd say, in singing. And yeah, I was quite behind really, because I hadn't really done it seriously. I'd always been more of an instrumental player, you know, violin and piano, particularly violin. There were a lot of kind of technical issues that I sort of had to deal with at that stage, and for quite a long time after that, in fact, as it turned out.
That's kind of the opposite way around to how most singers
Right. Yeah.
start, isn't
Yeah.
it? So they by the age of, I don't know, 18, they might have been
Yeah.
singing for 12 years.
Yes. That's
But
true.
on the other side, they don't have that musicianship that you would perhaps have as an instrumentalist.
Exactly. I mean, I think there are, you know, there are good things about both and perhaps slight disadvantages about both as well. You know, ideally, I think, I mean, looking back, if I had started, you know, a sort of more formal kind of technical training in singing younger, I think that would have benefited me. But at the same time, it was a great advantage to have the musicianship training as well. So yes, it's a difficult thing, I think, to know, isn't it, in general, when, you know, when young people should start, you know, sort of seriously training their voices. I don't know
Yeah, and
what you
I
think.
don't know about you, but people ask me that all the time.
Yeah,
You know, what age should they start to have singing lessons? And
exactly.
it's really tricky to say, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. And I think it so depends on the child, obviously, you know, and the voice, because, you know, everybody's voice is different. Every young person's voice has a different kind of journey to go on. And also, you know, the type of teaching that you receive, you know, would make a big difference, you know, because it has to be the right technical training, and otherwise, you know, you can get into bad habits, and you know, so
yeah,
it's
yeah.
there's quite a lot to sort of navigate there, you know.
So which sort of age group do you enjoy teaching the most?
Oh, I'd say I'd say maybe young adults, teenagers and young adults. I really enjoy teaching, because I feel like they are an age where they can kind of take on a little bit more, something a bit more kind of in depth in terms of their technical training. Their bodies and therefore their voices are a bit more developed, you know, physically. So physically and mentally, they're ready to receive a bit more kind of in-depth training. And you know, there's a lot that you can engage with then at that age in terms of like the repertoire, the music that you do with them, you know, that you can explore kind of perhaps more interesting repertoire. That's not to say that I don't enjoy teaching younger kids as well.
It's just completely different, isn't it?
It is very
It's
different.
different.
It is. And I suppose I would say that I'm more used to teaching kind of secondary school age children. That's kind of more where I feel really comfortable.
And is that the majority of your teaching is secondary school?
Yeah,
Children?
it is. It is. But I do teach some a bit younger, not that much younger. I tend not to really start teaching any child below about the age of 9 or 10. You know, I just feel, I actually think that before that age, they can do very well singing chorally. I think that's really, really a great experience to have, to do choral singing and to develop musicianship as well.
But then you also need to have the backup of either a musical family or parents that are willing to do all of that, you know, which is not often the case.
No, that you're absolutely right. And of course, you know, I myself had a huge advantage there in my mum, as I've said already. And you know, you're right that a lot of children, you know, they have no kind of way of knowing where to start, and no one to guide them.
Yeah, and often you're the first port of call. You know, parents would go to a singing teacher and think that that's the only place that they can sing. But yeah, you're right. There is so much more that they can do, but you do need that support and the backup.
You absolutely do. And so, you know, having supportive music teachers around, whether they're a class music teacher or a singing teacher or an instrumental teacher, makes a huge difference to to that child, or to any child, especially, as you say, if they haven't got necessarily all that support at home. It's
So
really
with your singing lessons that you had perhaps
yeah.
at university and later on, do they reflect in your own teaching at all, or would you say that your style of teaching is quite different because of experiences that you've had?
So I would say that I mean, although I got a huge amount out of my lessons while at university, and also then subsequently when I went to a conservatoire in London, where I had another teacher. I then it was just a personal thing for me, but I actually still had some technical issues with my voice that hadn't really been addressed, or I hadn't been able to address somehow, you know. It's just a sort of I think it's just a very individual thing. So I think while a lot of my contemporaries at the conservatoire in London were kind of at a stage where they were ready to sing professionally, and their techniques were very kind of already formed, and they were just kind of building on that with their teachers, I really wasn't at that level. And you know, so that for me was, well, it was a little bit it was difficult in a way to sort of address that. But when I finally did, I subsequently got some well, for many years was training with a teacher privately, and really had to go back to basics in terms of my technique.
Right.
So that was something which a lot of people wouldn't have had to have done, but for whatever reason, you know, I just, although, as I say, I had learned a lot from all those singing lessons that I'd had previously, a huge amount about interpretation, you know, about how to communicate as a singer, and also a lot of technical things which were really valuable, but somehow I needed something even more basic to get my voice
Which is really hard to stomach, isn't it, when you get to a certain level and you think you've got this wealth of knowledge and all of this repertoire, and then having to strip all that away feels like being at the bottom of a mountain.
That is exactly what it feels like. And I did find it really hard at first to kind of accept that that's where I was, you know. I was sort of very reluctant to sort of, you know, retrain in a sense.
Do you think that rebuilding has enhanced your teaching at all? So perhaps
amount, absolutely, no question. So I really then took that into my teaching. I was already teaching singing by that stage.
So how old were you when you started teaching singing?
I have to think about that. I was around 25, 24, 25. Yeah. So yeah, I started quite soon after I left music college. Yeah, I started teaching singing in a school. But then at first, you know, I was just sort of using what I'd learned from my previous you know, lessons and so on. But then as I got more into kind of working on my voice and sort of retraining it in a sense, I took that into my teaching. All my teaching, and as you say, it really made a huge difference.
So when you started teaching, did you think, right, I think I know enough now to go out into the world and to tell people that you can help them to sing? Did you have that confidence initially, or did you just feel your way through it?
It's a really interesting question. I think on the surface, I felt confident. I felt that I knew what I was doing, but underneath, I didn't really. And I think on some level, I knew that, but it was a little bit hidden at that time.
Yes. Well, isn't that just experience, though?
Of course, a lot of it is definitely about experience, and you just learn as you go along. Of course, that's a huge part of it. I
mean, so many, not just singers but musicians, come out of conservatoire and then their natural thing in between work is to teach, But of course they might have zero experience of teaching. But of course everybody has to start somewhere, don't they? And I think actually people know more than they think.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. And there's you know, you do, without realizing it, I think you pick up so much knowledge, don't you, as you go along in your own sort of studies. You know, there's so much there already, isn't there? No, you're absolutely right, there's so much to draw on. But as you say, then you know, as time goes on with experience, you just can develop those skills even more. And then, as I say, going more into developing my own voice and my technique, I was able to, I think, really essentially, I was able to understand a lot better how other people's voices worked. And what difficulties they might have, because I'd experienced difficulties myself. Technically.
And I think one of the areas where people need to get experience is listening, isn't it? Because you have to listen and then sort of diagnose, and those diagnostic skills take a while to develop, don't they? You can't suddenly just listen and know exactly what somebody needs. That takes a while. It's like a skill in itself to hone.
Yes, that is so true. Because, you know, as you say, you know, until you build up some experience of hearing how different people's voices behave, in a sense, you know, while you're working one-on-one with them, you know, it is really, really hard to kind of, and then, you know, to pinpoint that, you know, the technical issues that they might need to address. And obviously every voice is different, and that's wonderful. I mean, that is a completely wonderful thing about singing, that each voice is unique. But it's also very important to tailor one's teaching to that individual, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think you've also got to be willing to learn new things in order to help different people, because as you say, everybody has a different voice, and so you know, the issues can be so wide in terms of what they might need, and something that you may never have thought of that you can just do like that. I mean, people often say that the best singers make the worst teachers, don't they? Because they've encountered hardly any issues or problems.
I think that's perhaps, you know, the case with a couple of the teachers that I had myself, that they were fantastic singers. And look, I wouldn't say that they were bad teachers, not at all, but I think that they just couldn't necessarily understand or identify with some of the technical issues that I had. You know, that's the thing, isn't it? And unless you've experienced that, it can be difficult.
And I really think that if any amazing singer wants to go into teaching, it's really their duty to understand the mechanics of the voice, you know, all of the things that they've just taken for granted and have never had to think about. You know, you have to know the physically how things work in order to even identify or understand anybody else's problems that they're having.
Yeah, no, completely. You know,
and there are so many courses out there. You could literally be on a different course every week, learning about the anatomy of the voice.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I know a singer at the moment, singer and singing teacher, colleague of mine actually, who's just completed you know, a course on anatomy, and then subsequently on sort of more like vocal health in general, you know, and it sounds fascinating. And I would, you know, love myself to do more of that, you know, to learn more, you know, actual kind of anatomy.
Yeah, and also, especially if you've had a history of having lessons with somebody that uses a lot of imagery, which is, there's an absolute need for that, and there's a total time and a place, and you rely on that imagery. You do also need to know the background behind that, and what's
backing it up with the science.
Yeah, exactly. Because not everybody clicks onto the same form of imagery.
Exactly. That's so true. And some people just respond to imagery much more than others. Some people favor a much more kind of, you know, scientific approach, and then other people, as you say, some imagery works for some people and some imagery works for other people. And there are so many variables there in how to communicate what you're trying to get across to help that person develop their voice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And sometimes we just presume that people know exactly what you mean by certain things. I always remember hearing like an adjudicator talking about keeping the ping pong ball spinning in the air.
Yeah.
And, you know, and the audience looking as though, what the heck is she talking about?
Exactly.
And, you know, people just presume that you know what that means. And
exactly. Yeah, you know, and it can just seem crazy to some people, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Until you build up that shorthand with a teacher and you know precisely what they're alluding to and what that means for you. Yeah,
absolutely.
And I think that that's how singing has changed so much in the last, even I'd say 10 years, that there's so much more expectation on a teacher now to be able to back up all of this imagery with facts, you know. Whereas that was never the case. Never. You would never dare question a teacher, especially at the conservatoire, and say, you know, and ask actually physically, what is this? Because the chances are they probably wouldn't know.
Yeah. Absolutely. I know. I think, I mean, there've always been different schools of singing teaching, haven't there? You know, so, you know, that there have been perhaps some teachers and some schools of singing teaching that have been more technical, more scientific. But as you say, that's definitely become much more of the main, you know, the mainstream now, hasn't it? Like the way that people generally are expected to teach, I think. And you're right. And I think more and more that will be expected of us as teachers.
And actually, that can only be a good thing. It can only it can only be a great sense of a development for a teacher, and not just for the benefit of the student as well, I would have thought.
Oh yes, completely. And I think, you know, it's sort of you know, it's paramount that we continue always, you know, learning, as you say, learning new things ourselves, and, you know, adding to our kind of skill sets, and so that we can impart more of that information in a kind of like as clear a way as possible. I mean, that's essentially
and actually for some really experienced teachers that perhaps been teaching for 50 years, it takes a lot of courage to suddenly put your hand up and say, actually, I don't know what such and such a thing is doing such and such a point. I need to learn that. You know, it takes quite a bit of some guts, doesn't it, to do that, to admit that, and then to sign up to a course or whatever to inform yourself.
Yeah, completely. I think especially with, you know, with singing, it's all hidden, all the muscles that we use, and, you know, these, you know, two vocal folds, and, you know, the surrounding muscles, you know, it's sort of, unless we actually find out what's really going on, you know, it's very hard, isn't it, to know. Internal. So yeah.
Lovely. Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your chats.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Jane. Yeah.
Lovely to hear all about your singing.
To you. Oh, well, thanks. But thanks for asking me, inviting me along.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Okay.
Take care. Bye.
I'll sign up for that anatomy course now. Okay.
On you go. Bye.
Bye.